Buenos días o buenas tardes. This is a plática from the San Diego Chicano Latino Concilio on higher education. I'm Dr. Patrick Velasquez, a co-chair of the San Diego Concilio. Recently, the California State Auditor released a report in which it concluded that most of California's community colleges are not employing enough full-time faculty, that full-time faculty are only about 60% of the state's community college faculty, which is far short of the state's goal of 75% full-time faculty. In San Diego's 5 community college districts, only around 30% of the faculty are full-time. So this is going to be our plática for today. And we have with us several guests. We're glad to have you with us today. And we have with us Leonor McCrory, Sara Solaimani, and Dr. Octavio Garcia. So welcome to our program, everyone. Appreciate you being here. Could I ask each of you to share a little bit about your background and your experience teaching in San Diego community colleges?
Sure. I can start. My name is Sara Solaimani, and I'm a PhD candidate in the Visual Arts Department at UCSD in Art History, Theory, and Criticism. My research focuses on the border and Chicanx performance art from 68 to 94. And I've taught across the CSUs and the community colleges after my time as a TA and a associate in ended at UCSD. So it's been about 12 years now that I've been adjuncting and applied and gotten really close with a couple of full-time positions. I've taught at CSU, Bakersfield, and SDSU, and in departments of Chicana Studies and Art History. I've taught at CSU, San Marcos as well. In the community colleges, I've taught at Southwestern College, San Diego City College, Mesa College, and that's, I think, all that I can remember at the moment. Another one, I'm missing one there. In the department.
That you can't remember is very telling.
It's very telling, yes. And mainly in the Chicana Chicano Studies department, in the community colleges. And I am not of Latinx descent myself, full disclosure, but do have my master's in Chicana Chicano Studies from San Diego State and kind of came into formation as a Chicana by way of education.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
I'll follow. And I began my teaching at UCSD at the Muir College Writing Program. I don't remember what year, I think it was 2011. And then I went to Southwestern College where I taught 1 year. My studies are in American literature. So I taught English composition at different levels at Muir College and UCSD, and then Southwestern College. And Southwestern College is very dear to me because I began my studies there in the year 2000. I'm a late bloomer, and I'm also an import from Mexico. And so, unfortunately, Southwestern College was way, way far from me. And thanks to a mentorship relationship with one of my professors, I was able to get an introduction to the person who was doing the hiring at Miramar College. And I began teaching at Miramar College in the English department in 2015, and I have been there ever since.
Yeah, hello everyone. So my name is Octavio Garcia. Recently, just this past fall, became full-time in the Department of Chicana Studies at San Diego City College. I'm very fortunate. I feel very fortunate to be there. But as I share with some of my colegas, when I found out that I got the position, it was very satisfactory, but also you get a sense of self-guilt, because I kept thinking about my colegas adjuncts who didn't get the position and how they had to continue to rough it out. So I'll never forget those years. I was an adjunct for about 7 years, actually. I taught in every community college at the San Diego Community College District. I taught also at Southwestern College. I taught at San Diego State, Cal State San Marcos, even one semester at USD. Remember a lot of economic uncertainty, a lot of teaching from a position of vulnerability, of being overstretched because you have to accept so many classes to pay the bills. And so that was my experience, teaching as an adjunct. And I said it's very difficult to forget those years, very difficult. And I'm still, hoping that I see more adjuncts becoming full-time.
Well, thank you all again. Let me start with a question. I wanted to get your reflections on the state auditor's report, and there's several issues or dimensions of the issue that come out of this report. So I wanted to ask you all to reflect on that. And I'll start, Octavio, with your reflections on just the general issue that's raised in the report. What do you see as some of the problems that are associated with this inability or unwillingness of California community colleges to employ a sufficient representation of full-time faculty? And what are some of your experiences as an adjunct faculty that maybe reflect the concerns identified in the audit report?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. To be honest, my first reaction when I read that audit was frustration. When you learn about, for example, SDCCD mismanaging funds, that they could have hired more full-time faculty. That was very frustrating, because all these years they kept telling us there's no funding, there's not positions, when they could have created those positions. It means a lot, actually. It means so much for students that we serve, in the Chicana Chicanx community, that the student really sees themselves in the instructor. Unfortunately, because of a long history of oppression which has led to marginalization, policing, harassment from Border Patrol, just being singled out and disciplined, going through school. Many students in our community have an uneasy or negative relationship with authority. And I think, having them meet someone that can tell them that they can relate to them, that they understand where they're coming from, that lived their experiences, and that, brings up those experiences in the classroom, is definitely rewarding. It's refreshing, right? That not only they don't see themselves just in the material, but that they see themselves also with the person teaching them, and who understands their perspective. So it does matter a lot. It does matter, even as us, even as full-time faculty as well, right? If you're going to an institution where there's not other people who look like you as well, it's easy to feel intimidated as well.
Absolutely.
A lot of us, we experience, the infamous imposter syndrome. But
yes.
What I have reflected on that is that, the situations in my life when I had those experiences, I think I beat myself up way too much, and I didn't give myself enough credit. And I've come to the conclusion that it wasn't so much something was wrong with me. It was more that the institution that I was at was not welcoming to me as well. So, if I feel that as a professional, you can imagine what a student must feel like if they also have the same kind of experience, right? Leonor, Sara, any thoughts?
Sara? Or
Yeah, I think 12 years is enough to kind of speak for itself. Just surfing all the different institutions and kind of feeling like having to sell myself to all the different institutions and be like this yes woman, and constantly be held to a higher standard even than the full-time faculty of quote professionalism, and not having the luxury ever to have boundaries or say no in the era and the age of a lot of rhetoric around this kind of like self-care and boundaries and knowing and don't take on too much. Well, we don't have the luxury of not taking on too much. We got mouths to feed, right? Especially when a lot of us women of color working in these institutions, just like other workplaces, tend to be more vulnerable, statistically speaking. And many of us, like myself, are not only single, but lone mothers who are solely responsible for our children. And so I think when you think about and you add all those different layers of vulnerability and that imposter syndrome, which I highly second that feeling, Octavio, and that self-imposed kind of beating yourself up, which doesn't help you get in front of students with a confident, attitude or face. And you also feel all of the pressure of being the face of the institution before the students, right? Yeah, there are times when it really does get in the way of teaching to the level that I would like to and that I know I can. A lot of us, all of us, I think, are top academics in our fields and in our communities, in our specific areas of research. And what a shame that we can't really like sacarle el jugo, really like reach to the bottom of, or the, I guess the top of that potential, and be able to teach to the full capacity with that we can and that we're able to, because of lack of resources and time and representation within our departments.
Yeah, and the other thing I've got to mention, that those are good points, Sarah. Students they begin to pick up that who is a part-time and who's full-time.
Oh yeah.
And I think I've actually had over the years Chicano Chicana Chicanx students ask me is it worth it to go into academia? I mean, I see you as an adjunct profe and you rough it out. I mean, they also see a lot of us faculty of color as part-time, and they don't see a lot of us as full-time either. And so that also kind of affects them. Is there really a future here? And I think we really do need more students of color to go into academia, just to challenge this Eurocentric perspective that is still so dominant. But yet, if they don't see the possibility, then what's the point? Why go through that? And when I was an adjunct, I was very, very open about my experiences as and I still am. I still talk about adjunct issues in the classroom, and they begin to understand that there's definitely some double standards.
So we have two levels of oppression here and exclusion. One of them is at the student level, and the other one is at the instructor's level. I have felt both, and not only as a Latina woman, but also as an older woman who started back to college when some people are thinking about retirement in the year 2000. And I remember very vividly when I was walking around campus one time with my backpack full of books, and suddenly I was overcome by this feeling of being absolutely ridiculous. How ridiculous do you look? You don't belong here. It's look at around you, it's all young people. You look ridiculous. And I talked myself down of that somehow by remembering that I had carried a backpack when I was traveling before, and I didn't feel ridiculous. So feeling represented in not only the student population, but also among faculty is extremely important to validate the sense that you belong there. And we know scholarly literature on the topic supports that the point that feeling a sense of belonging and community is very important to student success. I would add that it's also important to faculty success.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for those reflections. Let me stick with Leonor if I can. The auditor's report identifies another issue, which is the lack of Chicano Latino faculty in California community colleges. So right now, according to the report, even though Chicano Latino students make up about 47% of California community college students, there's only about 18% of the system's faculty that are Chicano Latino. So, Leonor, if I can stick with your reflections on this, how do you see this this issue? What is the effect on the learning and the educational experiences of Chicano Latino students when there's such low representation of Chicano Latino faculty in community colleges?
Well, I think that, like I said, you need to have a sense of belonging, a sense of identification, and also role models. Role models are extremely important to make us feel, particularly those of us who have perhaps a lower sense of confidence, to make us remember and make us feel and believe, yes, sí se puede. We can do this. I don't know why we have such an underrepresentation among the faculty. I know that there is EEO training opportunities that are offered every now and then to faculty so that we might participate in screening committees for the hiring of faculty. I saw one of those emails last week. And I took the training thinking I could influence the selection process. I was never called. I was never called to serve in a selection committee. I think my training may have expired by now. Might have to renew it like the driver's license. But I think that I don't understand why we are so low in performance and how, if it is funded and mandated, as a state legislatively mandated, why is it that we are not held accountable for lack of performance? Where are the funds going?
Any other thoughts about that issue of representation?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's there's not discussed. I mean, it's significant. One of the things I really enjoy about the community college is that you're literally getting students from the community. And at City College, I mean, one of the, it's a challenging, but it's also a blessing that we get a lot of working class students, students who are going to be the first in their family to go to college, and students who come from immigrant communities as well, and all that, right? And they bring in some always fascinating perspectives to the material.
Mm-hmm.
And any theory, I mean, when I would teach at San Diego State, you would bring in someone like Karl Marx, and students, for the most part, like, okay, cool, just kind of go with it, right? At City College, it's like, well, wait a minute, what about this? And what about this? Why didn't you talk about that, right? So they're always challenging everything. Even when you bring in Freire into the classroom, they challenge Freire. But what about? I mean, yeah, but isn't he coming from privilege and all of the stuff, right? And I think that also among us, Chicana faculty who had those experiences, also gets lost in the classroom, right? Because as I mentioned, right, unfortunately, despite all these years in academic development and advances in scholarship, it's still a very white, middle-class dominated field. It really is. And, I think someone like Gloria Saldúa just really helps us and reminds us, right, of how important it is to get someone from our community who had a very different experience and has a very different perspective, not only to do that scholarship, but to teach it, right, and to challenge it, and to give students a different angle. But if the majority of your professors are going to be Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, WASP, you're going to miss out on so much. There's so much you're missing out on.
So another issue that maybe is not raised so directly in the auditor's report, but to me is strongly implied, and that's the impact when you have so few full-time faculty and an underrepresentation of Chicano and Latino faculty, you're certain to have less institutional support for the teaching of Chicana and Chicano studies. And Octavio, I know that that's now the full-time position you occupy, and
Mhm.
that particular department at City College. For folks who may not be familiar with this and maybe haven't read the literature, what do you see as the value of Chicana and Chicano studies, especially for our Chicana and Chicano students, our Raza students that we hope are going to occupy leadership roles in our community and
Yeah.
help to eliminate the systemic racism that still keeps us at a disadvantage.
Oh no, that's a great point. I think I mean, before I get into this, I think another issue that we didn't discuss, right, in terms of when you have, the majority of faculty as part-time, and as Sara, myself, and Leonor shared, you got to work at so many different institutions. You don't really have the time and the privilege to develop innovative learning strategies. I mean, having students write papers, do research, do projects it's just not sustainable, because you're teaching about 300 students a semester, and you just don't have the time to grade 300 papers and 300 projects. It's just, so then there's a lot of cutting of the corners, right? I come from the perspective that there's way too much blaming of the victim in our society. And so when I see a student struggling, I don't ask myself, why is the student struggling, right? I ask myself, what experiences has the student had, or what reactions have they had in society that is causing this negative relationship to learning. And I think something like Chicano and Chicana Studies is just, I mean, it's so critical to this day. For example, last year, I had a student at the end of the semester, he shared with me, he's kind of embarrassed at first. And he says, Profe, he says, I want to share something with you. And he said, before I took this class, I had never read a book in my life. And I thought, what do you mean? Like, didn't you finish high school? And didn't you have like English classes? Or he's like, yeah, but the stuff they had us read, I never saw the point of it. I didn't connect to it. It didn't make any, like, Dostoevsky, I don't know what, some Russian dude. And so anyways, so, in my class, he was reading stuff by Chicano and Chicana writers and about the Chicano and Chicana experience. And, he finally became motivated. He got an A in the class. He had never had an A in his whole life. And now, because of that class, he's moving on, right? He was motivated. He saw himself in the material. He can relate to it. It made sense to him now. And that is just so critical to help, for example, in our case here in California, continue to respond to the education gaps. Because the research shows, and it's shown this for years, right, that students who take ethnic studies classes have much higher success rates in college and higher success rates in life. And they go on to do some innovative, fascinating stuff. I mean, a lot of my peers that I had when I was at UCSD as an undergraduate, I mean, I still in touch with several of them, and they're doing some fascinating stuff in their lives. And a lot of them were ethnic studies majors. And so I think if first of all, we're not offering Chicano studies, for example, in this case, and we don't have many faculty who are teaching the discipline, and the majority of our faculty are part-time, then we're doing a great disservice. I mean, a great disservice to our community, and we're not going to get anywhere near where we have to be in terms of achieving equity gaps, responding to systemic racism, and so forth.
As Patrick pointed out in his introduction, these are the students that we're teaching today are the ones that the future leaders, the ones that will make change possible. If they will fight for change, I don't know whether they will make change possible. Might be too optimistic, but they will try to change. And it is very important for us to understand the past. A lot of us, well, not me because I'm older, but a lot of young people don't know of things that we older generations, of course, know very well. It is very important to keep retelling those stories, not only to build a sense of pride in our origins, but also to remember the injustices that have been perpetrated, and to remember that not in a mean sense of retribution, but to not allow that to happen, to understand why when they say that we are behind and we don't accomplish and we're lazy, No, we are not lazy. We have been held back. But now that we understand why, we are no longer going to indulge in that sense of guilt that we might have been having. Instead, we're going to, oh, this is what was happening. Now we're going to make sure that that doesn't happen anymore. We're going to make a change.
I'd like to move our plática to the more local level because we've been talking a lot about issues on the state level. The state auditor addressed the situation of community colleges in the entire state of California. We know that there are 8 community colleges in San Diego County, from south all the way up to the tip of North County. And the research that's been done, the data that we've looked at in our San Diego Concilio tells us that all of these institutions suffer from a lack of full-time faculty and a lack of representative Chicano Latino faculty. Most of them have very small, probably inadequate departments or programs in Chicana and Chicano Studies. So I wanted to first ask Sara for your reflections about what you've seen in the community colleges you've worked at. To what degree are you seeing leadership be attentive to these issues or making progress in trying to resolve some of these problems?
You know, I see that the leadership and the progress coming from the chairs of the departments, and it's really up to, unfortunately, the departmental culture of each of the individual colleges, each individual institution, for some of these problems to be addressed and start turning around. That doesn't really answer your question in terms of what is administration doing to at the higher levels of administration to address these issues, right? And that comes from pressure. When administration does finally pay attention, it comes from pressure from the chairs. Being a chair, as I understand it, in an ethnic studies department in a community college department, a community college in a community college is a job you don't want. It's incredible pressure from all sides, and also takes away from your teaching as an instructor, as a professor. When our students at the community college level are relying so heavily on their relationships with their professors, especially in the era now of a pandemic and an incredibly critical time for mental health of youth, what kind of message are we sending when our mental health is under so much of a threat as the faculty, as the people that the students are supposed to be looking up to? I see that it turns out, instead of progress, oftentimes in a lot of kind of infighting, stressed out chairs maybe calling their faculty, their part-time faculty, unprofessional, or just holding them to an unrealistic standard. You have to remember that when you're teaching 5, 6, 7, 8 courses, you're probably between 3, 4 different institutions. And on top of your personal email, through which you nervously route everything as to the best of your ability and try to put it to make sure to set it up so that your cell phone is popping up notifications, that you're probably most likely navigating 5 different email addresses, for some of us more. And there are policies across different community colleges with administration and chairs of departments that you have to check and answer on a daily basis your institutional email for that institution. Oftentimes I've missed a lot of opportunities for jobs where I had 2 days to answer when the job was being offered to me last minute. So I think progress is coming from when chairs of departments are willing to take more on themselves, stress themselves out, compromise their own teaching and their own research, and apply pressure then in turn on administration. That's not the way that it's supposed to happen. I don't call that progress at the administrative level. So yes, I, as a faculty, part-time faculty, have experienced a better time at San Diego City College, for example, than some of the other colleges that I work at, because of Justin Akers, Chacon's incredible advocacy, and you know, the way that he navigates almost kind of like seamlessly and invisibly, which I'm sure is an incredible amount of stress on him, the relationship and that liaising between the faculty and the administration. So it's not fair, you know, it's not the way it's supposed to.
That's an important point, I think, Sara, to start with the administration. We haven't talked about this much, but are these issues on the radar of academic senates and unions also within the community colleges locally?
Often our experience has been as part-time faculty that the unions and senates are very limited in terms of their reach and their ability to, like, what they can do. It's like, sometimes you feel like, you know, I'm paying my union dues, I'm going to meetings, but what is it doing for me? You know, like,
Yeah.
I don't know, that's been my experience.
Yeah. My experience, I mean, unless as faculty or departments, unless we advocate and we voice it, even, and sometimes it even takes like student demonstrations and we have to fight for it, they're not going to listen. They're not going to take the time to acknowledge it. If we don't say anything, they won't do it. I mean, unfortunately, I mean, I support the union, like I mean, the AFT at SDCCD, but I find that many times it's too cozy, way too cozy with administration. And I would love to see it be more aggressive in terms of really, I mean, who are you representing? Administration, or are you representing us as faculty? And unless we say something, as you're right, like, and Enrique before Justin as well, I mean, I share your same experience, Sara, right? When I was adjunct, really the place where I really felt a lot of nourishment and I felt welcome and I felt treated as an equal was in Chicano Studies at City College. And that's really what kept me centered for all those years. And yeah, Enrique and Justin really fighting for us, and, you know, asking us something less simple as, how are you doing? You know, how are you hanging up? You know, because we know it's rough.
What's the
yeah,
best
I mean,
get in contact with you in times of high stress when it's midterms and finals?
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, yeah, like I said, you know, unless we fight for it, it doesn't happen. And like, it's not really administration taking the lead, it's us challenging, and sometimes, yeah, that results in tensions and with other departments because they're also trying to fight for their position as well. But in our experience, I mean, I know recently we just hired, you know, including myself and Velma, just 2 faculty, but it had been what, over 20 years since someone had been hired. And I think it was the first time ever. Yeah, about 20 years, yeah, since someone got hired. Well, America got hired. No, actually, no, America got hired, but then Enrique retired. And I think Mesa just recently hired one person, full-time, Jennifer.
Yeah.
But that's it. I mean, it had been years. And it really makes no sense. You only have 3 full-time faculty at Mesa, 4 at City College, and yet the majority of our students are Chicano, Chicana, Chicanx faculty. We should have at least 10 professors who are in Chicano Studies serving our students, but that's not even close. So yeah, I mean, unless we say something, they're not going to do it.
And this forcing us to fight for scraps also in turn reproduces and reinforces that cycle of kind of oppression, and right, like this forcing us to fight against one another, this high level of competition, which, although to some degree is necessary, maybe, like, or is the reality, when we find out about misuse of funds and things like that, and that it wasn't that necessary, that actually there should be enough for everyone if we, you know, if the resources are fairly distributed, that you shouldn't have to adjunct for 12 years.
Oh yeah, you're right. I believe every professor should be full-time.
When sometimes there are positions that have been funded. A few years ago, the one chair, I forget her last name, she's a Spanish woman, Maria Clara, I think it's Ramirez, I can't remember for sure. She retired, and that position was not, that position was not replaced. I mean, they didn't hire a new faculty, and the position has it was funded. They did not hire a new person in the languages department.
Well, I want to thank you all. Unfortunately, we've run out of time for today's plática, but I want to thank our guests again, Leonor, Sara, and Octavio, for really helping us to shed some light on these important issues. And for those of you that have viewed our plática today, muchísimas gracias. And hopefully,
Gracias por having us.
my pleasure.
Gracias.
Thank you, Patrick.